It's hard to pinpoint the exact moment when my life began to unravel. Maybe it was the day of the accident, or maybe it had been creeping up all along, lurking in the shadows of my seemingly perfect world. Either way, I can tell you this: nothing prepares you for the moment you find out the person you trust most in the world has betrayed you. Before the accident, I was on top of the world, or so it seemed. My name was synonymous with tech reviews and innovation insights. My YouTube channel had millions of subscribers, and companies lined up for sponsorship deals. Every video I posted pulled in views like a magnet, each one a little more polished than the last. Life was a blur of unboxing gadgets, late-night editing marathons, and waking up to messages congratulating me on another viral hit. But all of that changed one rainy afternoon. I was driving back from a meeting with a potential sponsor when my phone buzzed. A glance at the screen was all it took, a millisecond of distraction. The next thing I knew, there was a loud crash, shattering glass, and the world spinning into darkness. I woke up in the hospital with a bandaged head and a prognosis that felt like a death sentence to my career. A traumatic brain injury, they called it. It wasn't immediately debilitating, but the lingering migraines, short-term memory issues, and sudden loss of energy made filming almost impossible. My audience noticed the shift. Views dropped, sponsors pulled back, and soon, the channel I had poured my soul into became a ghost town. Through it all, my wife, Emily, stood by my side, or so I thought. She was my rock, picking up the pieces as I stumbled through recovery. She started filming her own videos, lifestyle content mostly, and it seemed like a good distraction for her. I even helped edit her first few uploads, offering tips and tricks from my years of experience. Her channel grew quickly, far faster than I expected. I should have been happy for her, but something about it felt off. I told myself it was my own insecurity. Watching her succeed while I floundered was bound to sting. But then there were the late nights, the hushed phone calls, and the texts she shielded from view. And then there was the name that kept popping up, Jake. Jake was another YouTube sensation, one of those charismatic creators whose every move seemed calculated for maximum virality. I'd collaborated with him a few times back in my prime, and while we weren't close, I knew enough to distrust him. He had a reputation for using people and discarding them when they were no longer useful. So when Emily started mentioning him in passing, Jake said this, or Jake suggested that, I couldn't help but feel a pang of unease. It wasn't until I overheard a conversation late one night that the doubt solidified into something heavier. I had been getting a glass of water when I heard her voice from the living room. I'm just saying, Jake, this could really help both of us. He's not the same as he used to be. You understand, right? Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. She was talking about me. And the way she said it, the casual dismissal of everything I had been and everything I had given her, made my blood run cold. After hearing that conversation, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed replaying her words, each syllable sharper than the last. She had sounded so calm, so calculating. I wanted to confront her right then, but what would I say? I had no proof of anything beyond my gut feeling. So, I waited, hoping it was a misunderstanding. The next few days passed in a fog. Emily acted normal, too normal. She still made me coffee in the morning, kissed my forehead before leaving for the gym, and asked how my physical therapy was going. But there was a distance in her eyes, a flicker of something I couldn't place. I started noticing other things too. Her phone, always face down. The way she'd step out onto the patio to take certain calls. A new perfume that didn't smell like her usual choices. Small details that might have meant nothing in another context but now felt like pieces of a puzzle I was too scared to solve. Then one night, she told me she had a meeting with a content strategist to help grow her channel. She didn't say who, but I had my suspicions. When she left, I followed her. I felt ridiculous sitting in my car outside the trendy cafe where they met, but my instincts were screaming at me to keep going. And sure enough, there he was, Jake. His trademark grin, his perfect hair, his charm oozing from every gesture. Emily laughed at something he said, leaning in closer than necessary. I took a shaky breath and snapped a photo. It wasn't much, but it was something. When she got home later, I asked how the meeting went. She smiled and told me it was productive. Her tone was breezy, casual, like she didn't have a care in the world. I nodded, pretending to believe her, but inside, something broke. I wasn't sure who Emily was anymore, or if I'd ever really known her at all. I spent the next few days trying to shake off the unease. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe the stress of recovery and losing my channel was making me see things that weren't there. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself, the image of Emily with Jake wouldn't leave my mind. Her channel kept growing, faster than I thought possible. Sponsors flocked to her, and her videos started trending more often. Her audience loved her upbeat personality and her polished, effortless charm. But to me, her success felt like sand slipping through my fingers. It was hers, not ours, and I couldn't ignore the fact that Jake seemed to have a hand in it. One evening, I saw her editing a new video. She had headphones on, completely immersed in her work. Curious, I leaned over her shoulder. It was a collaboration video with Jake. The thumbnail was flashy, their smiles big and inviting. My stomach churned as I watched them banter on screen, their chemistry undeniable. "Looks great," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She jumped, pulling her headphones off. "You scared me," she said with a laugh, but there was a flicker of guilt in her eyes. "It's just a little collab. Jake thinks it'll help both our channels grow." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Makes sense." But deep down, it didn't. Not at all. The next day, while Emily was at the gym, I did something I hadn't done in years. I snooped. Her laptop was open on the kitchen counter, and I hesitated for only a moment before clicking into her email. Most of it was innocent, brand deals, event invites, but then I found a thread titled "Future Plans." It was a back and forth between her and Jake, discussing ways to leverage their partnership. My heart sank when I read one line from Jake: "Your husband doesn't have to know anything. This is your time to shine." There it was, the confirmation I didn't want. My wife wasn't just working with Jake, she was building something with him behind my back. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking. This wasn't just about her channel anymore. This was about us, about everything we had built together. And now, it felt like she was leaving me behind. That night, Emily went to bed early, claiming she had an early shoot the next morning. I stayed up, staring at the flickering glow of the muted TV. My mind raced, piecing together fragments of conversations, subtle shifts in her demeanor, and Jake's smirking face. It felt like my marriage was crumbling in slow motion, and I was powerless to stop it. Unable to sit still, I opened my laptop and did what I hadn't dared in months: I revisited my own YouTube channel. The numbers were worse than I expected. My once thriving empire now looked like a graveyard, with videos barely breaking a few thousand views. The comment sections were filled with people wondering where I'd gone, if I was okay, and whether I'd ever make a comeback. I wanted to respond to every single one of them, to tell them I was still here, still fighting. But instead, I closed the tab and buried my head in my hands. I wasn't that person anymore. Or at least, that's what I'd started to believe. The next morning, I decided to test Emily. I casually mentioned that I'd been thinking about restarting my channel, maybe even doing a collaboration with her. Her reaction was subtle but telling, a slight stiffening of her shoulders, a momentary pause before she smiled. "That's a great idea," she said, her tone light. "But maybe wait until you're feeling 100%. You don't want to rush back into it." She kissed my cheek and left for her shoot, but her words lingered. "Wait until you're ready. That could take months, even years." She wasn't just hesitant, she didn't want me back in the spotlight. Not now, not ever. Later that day, I received a notification on my phone, a new video from Emily's channel. I clicked it out of habit, expecting more of her usual polished lifestyle content. Instead, I was greeted by her and Jake, sitting side by side, laughing like old friends. "Hey guys. Today, Jake and I are doing a little Q&A for you," Emily began, her voice bright and confident. "We've been getting a lot of questions about how we met, what it's like working together, and our plans for the future." Our plans for the future. My hands tightened around my phone as I watched. They were relaxed, easy, finishing each other's sentences in a way that felt too natural. It wasn't just a collaboration. It was a partnership, one that left no room for me. By the time the video ended, I had made up my mind. I couldn't sit on the sidelines any longer, letting my life fall apart while they thrived. If Emily was so determined to move forward without me, I'd have to remind her of who I used to be. I wasn't done, not by a long shot. After watching that video, something inside me clicked. For months, I'd let myself spiral into self-pity, convincing myself that I was broken beyond repair. But now I was angry. I wasn't going to sit back and let Jake, or Emily, erase me from my own story. The next morning, I dusted off my camera equipment. It felt strange at first, handling the tools that had once been like extensions of my hands. My lighting kit was buried under a pile of storage boxes, and my editing software needed an update. Still, piece by piece, I set everything up. If I was going to make a comeback, I needed to start now. But this time, it wasn't just about the gadgets or the reviews. It was about me, my story, my fight to recover, my determination to reclaim what I'd lost. I filmed my first video in one take, sitting at my desk in the dim light of my home office. It wasn't flashy or overproduced, but it was raw and honest. "Hey everyone," I began, my voice steady but quieter than it used to be. "It's been a while. A lot has happened since I last uploaded, and I want to be real with you about where I've been. I'm not the same person I was a year ago, but I'm learning to accept that. And I'm ready to start again." By the time I hit upload, my hands were shaking. The video wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Within hours, comments started pouring in. "We missed you, man. Glad to see you back. Take your time, we're rooting for you." I read every word, my chest tightening with a mixture of gratitude and determination. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into my work. It wasn't easy. The migraine still came and went, and some days it felt like I was running on fumes. But every new upload brought a little more life back into me. I was reconnecting with my audience, and for the first time in months, I felt like I had a purpose again. Emily noticed, of course. She'd come into my office and watch me edit, her eyes flicking to the screen with a mix of curiosity and something else. Guilt, maybe. "You're working hard," she said one evening, leaning against the doorframe. "I have to," I replied without looking up. "It's the only way I'll catch up." She hesitated, as if weighing her next words carefully. "You know, Jake mentioned doing a collab with you. It could help you get more exposure." I paused mid-edit, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Thanks, but I've got it covered." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she left without another word. As the door clicked shut behind her, I realized something: she wasn't just watching me. She was worried. Good. Emily's suggestion about Jake lingered in my mind. Was she trying to throw me a lifeline, or keep me under control? Either way, I didn't need Jake. I needed to prove to myself, and to the world, that I could stand on my own. As the weeks went by, my channel began to pick up steam. The comments grew more frequent, the views crept higher, and emails from potential sponsors started trickling in. It wasn't anywhere near the peak of my old career, but it was progress, and that was enough. Emily seemed supportive on the surface, but I could sense the tension building. She spent more time at her shoots, coming home late with vague excuses about networking. The bright smile she once gave me now felt rehearsed, her warmth replaced by something colder. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but part of me wasn't ready for the truth. Not yet. One evening, while editing a new video, I noticed a notification pop up on my screen, an email from a name I didn't recognize, jakecollabs@gmail.com. My stomach tightened as I clicked it open. "Hey, man, just wanted to say I'm glad to see you back at it. If you ever want to team up, let me know. I think we could create something big together." It was a simple message, but the smug undertone practically leapt off the screen. I stared at the words, my jaw tightening. Jake wasn't just reaching out, he was marking his territory, letting me know he was watching. I didn't respond. Instead, I turned my focus back to Emily. She had always been careful, but no one is perfect. If she and Jake were hiding something, there had to be a crack in their facade somewhere. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I found it. Her phone was charging on the counter, unlocked. My hands trembled as I swiped through her messages. Most were harmless, chats with her friends, updates from her team, but then I found one thread, marked with a heart emoji, simply labeled J. The messages confirmed what I had suspected. Inside jokes, late night, I miss you, texts, even a photo of them together at a dinner I hadn't known about. My chest tightened as I scrolled through, each word another dagger to the heart. At the bottom of the thread, one text stood out. "Don't worry about him. Once this collab goes viral, you won't need him anymore." It felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. I sat there, frozen, my mind racing. Emily wasn't just drifting away, she was planning to leave me behind entirely. And Jake? He was more than happy to take my place. I put the phone back where I found it and walked out of the bathroom, my heart pounding. For the first time in months, I felt more than sadness or anger. I felt resolve. If they thought I was finished, they were in for a surprise. After finding those messages, I felt a strange calm wash over me. The shock had worn off, and what remained was a steely determination. I couldn't confront Emily yet, not without a plan. If I acted rashly, she'd find a way to twist it, to make me look like the one at fault. I needed proof, something undeniable that would expose the truth. That night, I started setting the pieces in motion. I reached out to an old friend, Kyle, a cybersecurity expert I had worked with during my peak as a tech reviewer. Kyle was the kind of guy who could track down anything or anyone with just an IP address and a hunch. When I explained the situation, he didn't hesitate. "I've got your back," he said. "Give me a day or two to dig around. We'll see what your wife and her boyfriend are up to." With Kyle on the case, I focused on my channel. My recent uploads were gaining traction, and I was starting to find my groove again. The community's support kept me going, their comments a reminder that I wasn't alone. Each video felt like a small victory, a step closer to reclaiming my identity. But even as I threw myself into my work, Emily's behavior grew harder to ignore. She became more secretive, leaving the house without explanation and dodging my questions. One night, she came home later than usual, her hair disheveled and a faint trace of Jake's cologne clinging to her clothes. "Rough shoot?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Yeah," she replied, avoiding my eyes. "We ran over time. You know how it is." I nodded, biting back the words I wanted to say. Instead, I smiled and said, "Well, I hope it was worth it." Her laugh was hollow. Of course it was. That night, as she slept soundly beside me, I received a message from Kyle, "Got something. Call me." I slipped out of bed and into my office, shutting the door behind me. Kyle picked up on the first ring. "Your instincts were right," he said. "I found emails, payments, even a draft contract for a podcast series they're planning together. It's all tied to Jake's account." My grip tightened on the phone. "What else?" "They're making moves to secure deals under her name, but Jake's pulling the strings. Looks like he's leveraging her growing popularity to lock in sponsors. And here's the kicker, they've been siphoning money from your joint account to fund the whole thing. The air left my lungs. You're kidding. I wish I was. I've got screenshots, account logs, everything you'll need. It's all legit. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. Thanks, Kyle. This is more than I expected. Anytime, man. Just let me know what you're gonna do. I hung up, staring at the documents Kyle had sent. The betrayal was deeper than I'd imagined. Emily wasn't just cheating on me, she was building her future by dismantling mine. But now, I had the proof I needed. And I wasn't about to let them win. With Kyle's evidence in hand, the path forward became clear. Emily and Jake weren't just betraying me emotionally, they were stealing from me, using my resources to fund their ambitions. It wasn't just personal anymore. It was war. The first step was to secure what was mine. I met with a lawyer the next day, a no-nonsense woman named Dana who came highly recommended. I laid everything out for her, the messages, the financial logs, the contract drafts. She flipped through the documents, her expression hardening with every page. "This is solid," she said finally. "If you want to proceed with a divorce, you'll have the upper hand. But we need to be strategic. No sudden moves until we're ready to file." "What about the money?" I asked. "Can I recover what they've taken?" Dana nodded. "We'll freeze the joint accounts and start tracing the funds. I'll make sure you're protected. But you need to stay calm and act like nothing's changed until we're ready to serve her." That night, I went home with a new sense of purpose. Emily was in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone while sipping a glass of wine. She looked up when I walked in, her smile as practiced as ever. "How was your day?" she asked. "Good," I said, keeping my tone even. "I've been thinking about making some big changes. Maybe even rebranding my channel." Her smile faltered for a split second before she recovered. "That's great. What kind of changes?" "Not sure yet. But I want it to be something fresh, something no one's expecting." She nodded, but I could see the gears turning in her mind. Good. Let her wonder. Over the next few days, I played my part perfectly. I helped her edit videos, asked about her shoots, and even pretended to take her advice on my content. All the while, I worked with Dana to gather more evidence and prepare for the day everything would come crashing down. Then, an opportunity presented itself. Emily told me she was attending a weekend retreat with Jake and a few other creators to brainstorm new ideas. She was excited, practically glowing as she packed her bags. "Are you sure you'll be okay here alone?" she asked, her tone dripping with faux concern. "I'll be fine," I said with a smile. "Enjoy yourself." The moment she left, I got to work. With Kyle's help, I set up cameras in the house, covering key areas like the living room and the office. I wasn't sure if Jake would show up here, but if he did, I'd be ready. That evening, I received a message from Kyle, there at the retreat. "Got some interesting footage already, sending it over now." I opened the file, my pulse racing. It was a video of Emily and Jake, sitting a little too close on a couch, discussing their plans for the podcast. At one point, Jake leaned in and whispered something in her ear. She laughed, placing a hand on his arm, and for a moment, the camera caught a look in her eyes that I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't just a partnership. It was personal. I closed the video, my jaw tight. They thought they were untouchable, that I was too broken to fight back. But they were wrong. The trap was set, and all I had to do now was wait. Emily returned from the retreat glowing with excitement. She barely said 2 words to me as she unpacked her bags, her phone buzzing with notifications every few minutes. I watched her from the doorway, keeping my expression neutral, though inside, the storm was brewing. "Good trip?" I asked casually. Yeah, she replied, not looking up. Really productive. We've got some big things in the works. Glad to hear it, I said, then left her to her phone. That night, I reviewed the footage Kyle had sent while she was gone. There was more than I could have hoped for: conversations, stolen kisses, and even Jake bragging about how much money they were going to make. The arrogance in his voice was infuriating, but it also gave me exactly what I needed. The final nail in the coffin came the next morning. While Emily was in the shower, I checked her laptop again. She'd forgotten to log out of her email, and there, in plain sight, was a draft message to Jake. Once the podcast launches, I'll tell him. He won't be happy, but at this point, it doesn't matter. We'll have everything we need. I took a deep breath, screenshot the email, and closed the laptop. The time for waiting was over. It was time to act. That evening, I asked Emily to have dinner with me. She seemed surprised but agreed, probably thinking it was just another sign of my cluelessness. I cooked her favorite meal, set the table, and even opened a bottle of wine. If she suspected anything, she didn't show it. As we ate, I kept the conversation light, asking her about her plans and pretending to be interested in her next big move. She talked animatedly about her exciting future, never mentioning Jake by name but making it clear she had no intention of slowing down. When the plates were cleared, I leaned back in my chair and looked at her. Emily, I said, there's something I need to tell you. Her smile faltered. What is it? I've been doing some thinking lately, I continued, my tone calm. About us. About trust. She tensed, her eyes narrowing slightly. What do you mean? Instead of answering, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. With a few taps, I opened one of the videos Kyle had sent and slid it across the table to her. It was the clip of her and Jake at the retreat, sitting close and whispering. Her face went pale as she watched. What is this? She stammered. You tell me, I said, my voice steady. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my wife and her business partner have been lying to me. She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. Don't bother denying it. I have everything: emails, bank statements, footage. You and Jake thought you could build your empire by tearing me down. But guess what? I'm still standing. Her expression shifted from shock to something colder. You were spying on me. Don't try to turn this around, I said sharply. You brought this on yourself. She stood up, pushing her chair back so hard it scraped against the floor. You don't understand. I did this for us, for me. You've been stuck in the past, clinging to a career that's over. I needed more. I laughed bitterly. More? You mean Jake? Don't dress this up as ambition, it's betrayal, plain and simple. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she grabbed her phone and stormed out of the room. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. The wheels were already in motion. The next morning, Emily was served divorce papers. She tried to argue, to plead, but the evidence was airtight. Dana had seen to that. The joint accounts were frozen, and I made sure every dime they'd siphoned was accounted for. As for Jake, I sent the footage of his bragging and scheming to every major brand he worked with. By the end of the week, his partnerships had crumbled, his reputation in shreds. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my life. And as I uploaded my latest video to a wave of support and encouragement from my audience, I realized I was finally free. The days after Emily moved out were a strange mix of emptiness and relief. The silence in the house was deafening at first, but I filled it with work. My channel had become my sanctuary, a place where I could pour all my frustration, pain, and determination. Every video I uploaded felt like a step toward reclaiming my identity. Emily tried to reach out a few times, mostly through emails. They were long and apologetic, full of excuses and attempts to justify her actions. I didn't respond. What was there to say? She had made her choice, and now she had to live with it. Jake, on the other hand, wasn't as quiet. He posted a video addressing the smear campaign against him, claiming it was all lies and jealousy. But the evidence I'd released spoke for itself. Comments flooded his video, calling him out for his arrogance and betrayal. His subscriber count plummeted, and within a month, his channel was practically dead. Meanwhile, my channel was thriving. The story of my comeback resonated with people, and my authenticity struck a chord. Brands started reaching out again, and I signed a major deal that set the stage for my return to the top. But this time, I did things differently. My content was more personal, more reflective. I wasn't just a tech reviewer anymore, I was someone who had faced the worst and come out stronger. One day, as I was wrapping up a live Q&A with my audience, a comment caught my eye. How did you bounce back after everything you went through? I paused, the cursor blinking on the screen as thousands of viewers waited for my answer. Finally, I smiled and said, you know, I think the key is realizing that you're not defined by what happens to you. You're defined by what you do next. And me? I decided to fight back. To rebuild. And honestly, I think I'm better for it. The chat exploded with support, and I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I wasn't looking back, I was looking forward. That night, as I sat in my office reviewing footage for my next video, I glanced at the wall where a framed photo of my old YouTube silver play button hung. Below it, a new plaque gleamed, the gold play button I had earned after my return. Emily and Jake had tried to destroy me, but in the end, they only made me stronger. The betrayal that had nearly broken me had become the fire that forged a new version of myself, one that was ready for whatever came next. And as I clicked upload on my latest video, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving.